could you do this to me? She is my mother, for crying out loud.
Sweetheart, you know I've always loved you. I don't know what came over me. I guess it was the devil's handwork.
Yeah, that right there was me. And that man over there, that was my husband, the same man I once believed I'd spend the rest of my life with. Back then, if you looked at us from the outside, you would have sworn we had it all figured out. But appearances have a dangerous way of hiding the truth. So before I tell you how we got here, let me take you back to the very beginning. My name is Sarah Okafor Williams, and I'm going to tell you a story today that I have never fully told anyone. Not my therapist, not my best friend Cynthia, not even my journal. I'm going to sit right here and lay every single piece of it out for you because I have spent the last 2 years healing from the most devastating betrayal a woman can experience. And I've come to understand that silence doesn't protect you. Silence just lets the wound fester in the dark. So today, we bring it into the light. Let me take you back. Let me take you all the way back to the beginning because for you to truly understand how badly this broke me and how completely God has restored me, you need to understand who I was before it all happened. You need to understand the woman I was when I walked down that aisle. Because she was good. She was pure. She loved with everything she had. And she deserved so much better than what she got. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, South Side. My mama, Benita, that's her name. Benita raised me mostly on her own after my daddy passed when I was 11 years old. She was a beautiful woman. My mother, striking. High cheekbones, dark brown skin smooth as river water, big brown eyes that could pull you in and make you feel like the most important person in the room. She was vibrant and loud and funny, and she took up space in a way that I always admired. She was the kind of woman people noticed when she walked into a room. I was her only child. And growing up, it was just the two of us against the world. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and she always made sure I knew I was loved. She worked double shifts at the hospital as a nursing aide, came home smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion, and still somehow managed to press my hair and help me with my science projects and show up to every single one of my school plays. I worshipped that woman. I absolutely worshipped her. I think that's the part that's hardest to explain to people who haven't been through something like this. When the person who betrays you is someone you literally built your identity around, someone who was your first home, your first safe place, the betrayal doesn't just hurt your heart. It dismantles your entire framework for understanding love. It makes you question everything you ever thought you knew about what it means for someone to love you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me keep going. I graduated from Spelman College with a degree in fine arts. I was a painter. I had been painting since I was a little girl. It was the thing that made me feel most like myself, most alive. Colors and canvases and the way light moves through a room at 4 in the afternoon. That was my world. After college, I got a job at a private arts organization downtown, helping to run exhibitions and educational programs for kids in underserved communities. It wasn't glamorous money, but I was doing what I loved and I was good at it. I met Femi when I was 28 years old. He came to one of our gallery shows. I still remember the night perfectly. He was tall, dark-skinned, clean-cut in a gray blazer, and he stood in front of one of my larger paintings for almost 10 full minutes without moving. I noticed him before he noticed me. I watched him look at something I had created with the kind of attention and stillness that most people reserve for prayer. When he finally turned around and our eyes met, I felt something shift in my stomach that I had never felt before. His name was Femi Williams. He was 32, a logistics manager for a mid-sized shipping company, steady and responsible and charming in that quiet, confident way that some men have. He bought 2 of my paintings that night. 2, without blinking. And when he asked if he could take me to dinner, I said yes before I'd even finished processing the question. We dated for 18 months. Those were beautiful months. He was attentive, he was present, he remembered things, the little things, the things that matter. He remembered that I took my tea with honey, not sugar. He remembered that I loved white gardenias. He remembered that I had a complicated relationship with my birthday because it was the same week my daddy died. He was careful with me, and I loved him for that carefulness. When he proposed, I cried for 20 minutes straight, happy tears. The kind of tears that come when something you've been quietly hoping for finally arrives and it looks even better than you imagined. We got married on a Saturday in October. The leaves were turning. The church was full of people we loved. My mama walked me down the aisle because I had no father to do it, and she was so beautiful in her burgundy mother of the bride dress, tears streaming down her face, squeezing my arm so tight the whole way down. I thought that was love. I thought that was her pride overflowing. I had no idea. We bought a house together, a 4-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood in Decatur. Femi handled most of the down payment. I contributed what I had saved. We moved in on a Thursday, and that first night we sat on the kitchen floor eating takeout Chinese food because the furniture hadn't arrived yet, and I remember looking at him across a container of fried rice and thinking, this is it. This is the life. We had been married for 4 months when Mama called and said she was lonely. Now, let me be honest with you. When she said she was lonely and that she wanted to come stay with us for a while, I felt 2 things at the exact same time. I felt love, that automatic, knee-jerk love I always had for my mother. And I felt something else. A small, quiet hesitation. A flicker of something I couldn't name yet. But I was her daughter. I had been trained my whole life to put her feelings first, to make space for her, to be what she needed. So I said yes. I told Femi. He said he was fine with it. He said she was welcome. She moved in on a Friday. And everything changed. Now, here is the part where most channels would ask you to drop the location you're watching the video from in the comments section, and no, I won't do that. As you can see, we are a small community of people here, less than 200 of us, and I greatly appreciate every one of you. And now here's where you would go to the comments section to tell me something instead of saying what location you're watching from. Tell me what you think should be added to the video to make it better and more enjoyable for you to watch. I reply to every single comment. Now, let's get back to the story. At first, it was subtle. The way she and Femi laughed together at dinner a little too easily, a little too comfortably for 2 people who had only really known each other a few months. The way she would sometimes touch his arm when she was talking to him. The way he started coming home earlier on the days she was cooking. The way she would refer to him not as my son-in-law, but as Femi. Always just Femi. With this softness in her voice that I wasn't used to hearing her use with anyone. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself my mama was just being friendly, sociable, the way she always was with everyone. I told myself Femi was just being a good host, making her feel welcome in our home. I told myself that the unease sitting in my chest every time I watched them together was my own insecurity, my own damage, something I needed to work through. So I worked through it, or tried to. I threw myself into the gallery, into my paintings, into my work with the kids. I came home in the evenings and made dinner and smiled and asked about everyone's day and pretended that everything was exactly as it should be. But I want to tell you something. Women know. We always know. Even when we don't have proof, even when the story we're being told is perfectly convincing, even when the person we're suspicious of is our own mother, we know. There is something in the body, some ancient alarm system that women carry in their bones, and it does not lie. I knew something was wrong. I felt it every single day. I just didn't yet know how wrong it was. That is the thing about living inside a lie. The lie doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a warning label or a flashing light. It just quietly reshapes your world, rearranging the furniture of your life so slowly that you barely notice until one day you look up and you don't recognize the room you're standing in anymore. I was standing in a room I no longer recognized. And I was about to find out exactly why. Now, hold on a second, my dear, just a quick moment. If you're still here, it truly means a lot to me. But here's something that surprised me. Almost 98% of you watching haven't subscribed yet. 98. It's like enjoying something and never saying a word about it. So here's my small request. Tap the subscribe button. It's completely free, and it just means you won't miss what comes next. And if you've enjoyed this, leave a like as well. It really helps more than you think. Thank you for staying with me. Now let's continue. People always ask me when I've talked about this in pieces to people who knew me, then they always ask, and were there signs? Were there red flags? And I want to be completely honest with you when I answer that because I think it's important. Not for blame, not to beat myself up or have you all in the comments telling me what I should have done differently, but because I think the truth of how these things unfold is important. I think other women and men deserve to hear it so they know what to look for when they're in the middle of it. Yes, there were signs. There were signs from almost the very beginning. But signs are only visible in hindsight. When you're inside the story, the signs just look like ordinary moments. They look like personality traits and coincidences and little irritations that you file away and forget. That's the nature of it. That's how betrayal works. It hides in plain sight. The first real crack, the first moment where I felt something cold run through me happened about 3 weeks after Mama moved in. It was a Tuesday. I had come home early from the gallery because we'd wrapped up an installation ahead of schedule, and I was in a good mood. I had picked up groceries, I was planning to cook a proper dinner, and I was looking forward to a quiet evening at home. When I pulled into the driveway, Femi's car was already there. I thought that was strange. He usually didn't get back until after 6, but I assumed maybe he'd had a short day. I came through the side door into the kitchen, set my grocery bags down, and heard voices in the living room. Laughing. Easy, relaxed laughter. I walked to the doorway and looked in, and I saw Femi and my mother sitting together on the couch, close together, watching something on his phone. She had her head slightly inclined toward his. He was showing her something, and whatever it was, she was laughing with her whole body, one hand resting on her knee, completely at ease. They didn't hear me come in. I watched them for about 5 seconds. And in those 5 seconds, I saw something that I cannot fully describe, but that I felt in the marrow of my bones. It wasn't just two people laughing together. It was two people who were comfortable with each other in a way that felt private, familiar, like they had a world between them that existed separately from me. When Femi finally looked up and saw me standing there, something passed across his face. It was fast, a quarter of a second, but I caught it. A flicker of something. Surprise, maybe? Or something closer to that. "Hey, baby," he said, and his voice was completely normal, completely easy. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said, "wrapped up early." My mother turned around and smiled at me, big, warm, her signature smile. "My daughter, come, sit. We were just watching this funny video Femi found. Come see." I sat down. I watched the video. I laughed at the appropriate parts. I went to the kitchen and made dinner. And I did not say a word about the feeling in my chest because, what was I going to say? What was there to say? My husband and my mother were watching a video on the couch. There was nothing there. Nothing I could point to. But the cold thing in my chest didn't leave. It just settled in and made itself at home. Over the following weeks, the cracks appeared more frequently. Small things that each seemed innocent on their own, but that, taken together, began to form a picture I didn't want to look at. My mother started paying very careful attention to Femi's food preferences. She would ask him, not me, him what he wanted for dinner. She would make his favorite dishes, pepper soup and of bata rice and the kind of egusi stew that takes all afternoon to get right, and she would present them to him with a pride that I had only ever seen her reserve for things she really cared about. Once I mentioned offhandedly that Femi actually preferred his egusi with less oil. She snapped at me. Told me I was wrong, that she had been cooking since before I was born and she knew what a man wanted on his plate. I let it go. Filed it away. Femi started coming home with small things for the house that Mama had mentioned, wanting a new pot, a particular brand of seasoning, a throw pillow in a color she'd admired in a magazine. He would present these things casually, like it was nothing, like he'd just happened to pick them up. But I noticed. I noticed because he had stopped bringing me small things. He used to do that, stop at a florist on the way home, show up with a mango or a small cake from that bakery I liked. He'd stopped doing that around the time she moved in. The small kindnesses were now flowing in a different direction. There was also the matter of their errands. Once or twice a week, Mama would ask Femi to take her somewhere to pick up herbs from a market across town, or to run some errand that she would describe in vague terms. And he always said yes, without hesitation, without complaint. He would take her, and they would be gone for hours. When they came back, Femi would be in a better mood than I'd seen him in all week, and Mama would be glowing in that particular way she had when something had gone exactly as she'd planned. I asked him. Once I tried to keep my voice neutral, tried to make it sound casual. I asked him what took them so long at the market. He turned on me almost immediately. Told me the question was silly. Told me I was questioning him about perfectly ordinary errands. And I looked at him. With this man I had married, This man whose carefulness and attention had been what made me fall in love with him, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. A coldness, a distance, like he was looking at me from very far away. I think that was the moment I understood, somewhere deep and wordless, that I was losing him, that I had already lost him in some way I couldn't yet name. I just didn't know to whom. My best friend Cynthia had been trying to tell me something was off for weeks by then. Cynthia and I had been friends since our freshman year at Spelman. She was one of those women who loved you so fiercely and honestly that being her friend sometimes felt like being held. She had never been fond of my mother, not since we were in college, and Mama had showed up unannounced for a weekend and spent the whole time critiquing my apartment and my choices and my friends. Cynthia had watched that whole weekend with wide eyes and a tight smile and afterward said, "Sarah, your mama loves you, but she loves herself more." I had defended Mama, of course. I always defended Mama. When Cynthia came to visit me, about 2 months after Mama had moved in, she was barely in the door before Mama was on her, looking her up and down, commenting on her outfit, making snide remarks dressed up as concern. I tried to smooth it over. I tried to tell Cynthia that Mama was just being Mama. But Cynthia pulled me aside in my own bedroom and said something I never forgot. She said, "Sarah, I love you. And because I love you, I'm going to say this carefully. The way your mother talks to your husband and the way your husband responds to her, please keep your eyes open. Please, I'm not saying I know anything. I'm saying something feels very off. And you know I don't say things like that without a reason." I brushed it off. I hugged her. I told her she was being dramatic. I wish with everything in me that I had listened. There was one more thing. One moment from this period that I want to tell you about, because it stayed with me. It haunted me even when I was trying my hardest to be normal, to be a good wife, to push the alarm down. I had woken up in the middle of the night, maybe 3:30 in the morning, and rolled over to find Femi's side of the bed empty. This happened occasionally. He sometimes got up to work late when a deal was going through, but something made me go downstairs. I don't know what. Instinct. That body alarm I told you about. I walked down the stairs quietly, in the dark, and I heard his voice in the kitchen. Low, murmuring. He was on the phone. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened. I could only make out fragments, but I heard him say clearly, I know, Benita." And then after a pause, "You know you're different. You always have been. My mother's name is Benita." I stood there in the dark at the bottom of my own staircase and felt something crack open inside me. Not fully yet. Not all the way. Because my mind was still fighting it, still running 1,000 explanations for why my husband might be on the phone with my mother at 3 in the morning, calling her by her first name and telling her she was different. Still insisting that there was some version of this that made sense, that was innocent, that I could live inside without it destroying me. But the crack was there, and it was getting bigger. I went back upstairs. I got into bed. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and listened to my own heart beating and thought about how strange it was that a heart could keep going steady and rhythmic and mechanical, even when the person it belonged to was quietly falling apart. Femi came back to bed about 20 minutes later. He slid in beside me and was asleep within minutes. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay there until the room got light and the birds started outside and I heard my mother moving around in the kitchen making the morning coffee. And I thought about the woman I had walked down that church aisle for, and the woman I had believed she was, and the two versions of her refused to line up in my mind. Something was happening in my home. Something was happening between the two people I loved most in the world, and I was the last to know. I want to tell you about the night everything came apart because it didn't happen the way I imagined it would. I had been bracing myself for some kind of confrontation for weeks by then. Some argument that would finally crack everything open, some conversation that would force the truth into the light. But it didn't happen like that. It happened quietly. It happened on a Tuesday evening when I was doing the most ordinary thing in the world. The weeks leading up to that night had been particularly heavy. Femi had announced he was going on a business trip, a week-long one, and had left on a Monday morning with one suitcase and a distracted kiss on my forehead. I had watched him drive away from the front door and felt, for the first time, genuinely relieved to have him gone. That realization frightened me more than anything else had up to that point. That the absence of my husband felt like exhaling. Then, 2 days after he left, Mama announced that she was going to the village to visit her sister. She said she needed a break, that she'd been cooped up too long, that the air there was good for her joints. She kissed me on the cheek, told me to eat properly and not work too hard, and then she was gone too. And for 2 whole days, I lived alone in my beautiful 4-bedroom house and breathed freely for the first time in months. I used those days to paint. I pulled out canvases I hadn't touched in over a year, and I painted with everything I had. I painted colors. I didn't have names for deep burgundies bleeding into black, bright yellows cutting through gray. I didn't know what I was painting. I just knew I needed to paint. I know now that I was trying to process something my conscious mind wasn't ready to face. On the 3rd day of being alone, I decided to go for a walk in the evening. I left my phone at home. Not on purpose, I just forgot it in the rush to get some air. I walked for a long time, longer than I'd intended, and by the time I turned around, the sky had gone dark and I was on the opposite side of the neighborhood, from my house with no phone and no money for a cab. That was the night I met Benson. I was standing on the corner looking confused and clearly distressed when this man, young, warm-faced, a little taller than average, with kind eyes, walked up and offered me his umbrella because it had started to rain. I told him I didn't need his help. He said that was fine. He wasn't trying to impose, but I looked like something was wrong, and if I needed directions or a warm place to sit for a minute, he was happy to help. There was something about his voice, calm, grounded, like someone who wasn't performing anything, who wasn't trying to be anything other than exactly what he was. I was so tired by that point of people performing. I said, okay. We went to a diner around the corner. He bought me soup and we talked for almost 2 hours. He told me his name was Benson, that he was 30 years old and ran a repair shop for vintage cars, that he had grown up in this neighborhood and loved it. He was funny in a dry, quiet way that made you feel like you'd earned the joke somehow. He asked about me, and I told him I was an artist, that I was married, that I was tired in a way I couldn't quite explain. He listened without filling the silence with commentary or advice. He just listened. When he walked me home, he handed me his card and said that if I ever needed someone to talk to, no strings, no agenda, he was there. I took the card and I thought I'd probably never call him. I called him 3 days later. We met for lunch and talked for 3 hours, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like a person. Not a wife, not a daughter, not a keeper of the house. Just a person, with thoughts and feelings and a point of view, talking to another person who was genuinely interested in what I had to say. I want to be clear about something. I never crossed any line with Benson. Not then, not later. He was a friendship, and a precious one, but it was only ever a friendship. I say this not because I owe anyone an explanation, but because I think it matters for the story. Because the contrast between what Benson was, a kind, platonic human presence who saw me as a full person, and what was happening in my own home is part of why the eventual revelation hit me so hard. He advised me, Benson did, in that second meeting when I had started to hint at the tension at home, to have a direct conversation with both Femi and my mother. He said that if Mama needed to leave so Femi and I could rebuild our privacy and connection, then that was a conversation worth having. He said I shouldn't bottle things up. He said whatever was wrong could probably be talked through. He didn't know what was wrong. Neither did I, not the full truth. Not yet. The night everything cracked open for good was about a week after Femi returned from his business trip. Mama had come back from the village too the day before he did, and the house had resumed its particular tension, that quiet, unbearable tension where everyone is performing normal, and nothing is normal at all. That evening, Cynthia called me and said she needed to see me, urgently. Her voice had something in it I'd never heard before. Not panic exactly, but something close to it. A seriousness that made me not ask questions. I grabbed my purse and went. She met me outside, and she looked at me with the expression of a person who is about to do something that's going to hurt both of you, but who loves you too much to stay quiet. "Babe," she said. I need to show you something. Come around the corner of this car with me. I thought she was being dramatic. I went around the corner, and that's when I saw them. A hotel entrance, lit up in the dark, people coming and going, and among them walking out together too, close Femi and my mother. Mama had her head tilted up toward him. He had his hand at the small of her back. They were talking, they were laughing, and the way they were looking at each other was not the way a man looks at his mother-in-law. Cynthia had been at the hotel for a work event. She had seen them coming out of the elevator together and had immediately gone outside to call me. I stood behind that black car and watched the two of them walk to Femi's car, and I heard my mother say, I just wish Sarah wasn't in the picture. For how long do I have to stay in the shadows while she bears your name? I want more for myself. And I heard my husband say, It's okay, Benita. We already agreed to this. Let's just enjoy it. I'll drop you off and come back tomorrow morning. The world did not end. That's the strangest thing. The world did not end. The street stayed lit. Cars kept passing. Cynthia's hand found my arm and she held it, and I stood there and watched my husband open the car door for my mother and watched my mother get in. And the whole time my mind was running through every single memory of the past several months and rearranging them the late nights. The long errands, the closeness, the laughing, the phone call at 3 a.m, rearranging all of it into a new picture that made a terrible, perfect kind of sense. Cynthia said she was sorry. She said it over and over. I told her I had to go home. She begged me to come stay at her place instead, to not confront anyone alone. I told her I needed to face it. I needed to look my mother in the eye. I walked back to my house. I walked in through the front door, and when Mama came down the hallway looking innocent and composed, I let out everything that had been living in my chest for months. There are things I said that night that I won't repeat here, not because I'm ashamed, but because they came from a place of pure, raw pain, and they belonged to that moment. What I will tell you is that my mother did not deny it. She looked at me with those big brown eyes that I had loved my whole life, and she said, Femi and I have been connected since long before you two met. When life brought us back together, I knew it was fate. She said my husband loved her. She said their connection was more real than my marriage. She said she hadn't meant for me to get hurt. And then she told me something that went through me like a cold blade. She was pregnant. I have played that night back in my mind more times than I can count. The way the light looked in the hallway when I walked through the front door. The way my mother's face went through in the space of about 3 seconds, from composed to alarmed to something I can only describe as caught. The way my own voice sounded to me from the outside, high and strange and tight with the effort of containing something enormous. I need to be honest with you about something before I go further, because I think it matters. When I walked into that house, I was carrying something more complicated than pure rage. I was carrying grief. Because the person I was about to confront was not just a woman who had betrayed me. She was my mother. She was the woman who had pressed my hair every Sunday morning. The woman who had held me when my daddy died and promised me that God had a plan. The woman whose voice had been the first voice I could remember, the first voice that had made me feel safe in the world. Grief and rage are strange bedfellows. They move through you at the same time, and they make you feel like you're being torn in 2 directions at once. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to sit down on the kitchen floor and cry like I was 11 years old and my daddy had just died all over again. I chose to stand. I chose to keep standing through the whole thing because I knew if I sat down, I might not get back up. Mama, I said when she came into the hall. I know. Her face did that thing I described, the 3-second journey. She stopped walking. She looked at me very carefully, the way you look at something when you're trying to calculate how much it knows. What do you know, my daughter? I saw you, I said. Cynthia saw you first and she called me. I came. I saw you both coming out of that hotel. I heard what you said to him in the parking lot. She was quiet for a long moment. And then, to her credit, if you can call it that, she didn't lie. She didn't manufacture some alternative explanation. She didn't perform shock or indignation. She just looked at me with something in her eyes that I think might have been relief. In the way that people who have been carrying a secret for a long time sometimes feel relief when it's finally out. like the weight of the lie lifting even as the truth crashes down. "Sarah," she said, "I'm sorry you found out this way. I truly am." "This way?" I said. "Is there a good way to find out that your mother is sleeping with your husband?" "I didn't want you to be hurt." "Don't," I said. The word came out hard and flat. "Don't tell me you didn't want me to be hurt. Everything you have done since you moved into this house has been hurting me. You just didn't want to be seen doing it." She was quiet again. And then she said the thing that I think showed me more clearly than anything else that night who my mother really was underneath the warmth and the big eyes and the Sunday hair pressing. She said, "Femi and I have a connection that goes back further than your marriage. We knew each other before you and he ever met. When we found each other again, it was bigger than both of us. I'm sorry it happened in your house. I'm sorry it happened this way. But I'm not going to stand here and tell you that it wasn't real, because it was the realest thing I've felt in years." I looked at her for a long time. "Were you even lonely?" I asked. "When you called and said you needed to come stay with us, was any of that real?" She had the grace at least to look away. I sent her to pack her things. She refused at first. Said this was her home too, said Femi. Wouldn't want her to leave. I told her that I didn't care what Femi wanted. That what I wanted was for her to get out of my house before I said something neither of us could recover from. We went back and forth and it got loud. It got physical in the sense of movement, bags ending up outside the door, voices rising, and finally she was out. Femi came home the next day. I want to tell you about that conversation too because it was different from the one with Mama. With Mama there was grief underneath the anger. With Femi there was something colder, something more final. He walked in and he looked at me and he could tell immediately that the landscape had changed. "Sit down," I said. Sat. I told him what I knew. I didn't perform it dramatically. I didn't cry. I just laid it out piece by piece the way you lay out evidence. The phone call at 3 a.m, the way they'd been together, the hotel. His face stayed very still the whole time. Femi was always good at being still. I had once thought that stillness was a kind of strength. I now understood it was a kind of armor. When I finished, he said, "I wasn't going to lie to you. If you'd asked me directly, I would have told you." "If I'd asked you directly," I said. "My husband and my mother, and I'm supposed to have known to ask directly." "Sarah, were you ever going to end it? Were you ever going to choose our marriage?" He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that I replay sometimes late at night, not because it destroyed me, but because of how clearly it revealed who he was. He said, "You're a good wife, but your mother and I have something different. She understands a part of me that you never reached." I sat with that for a second. "I see," I said. "I didn't marry the wrong woman," he said, and I think he believed this. I think he was trying to be kind in his way. "I just found someone who is more right." "And that someone," I said, "is my mother." He didn't answer. "She's pregnant," I said. Something moved across his face then. That was the first crack in his composure. "What?" "She's pregnant, Femi. She told me last night. Congratulations." I watched the stillness break on his face, and I understood in that moment that for all his talk of connection and understanding and fate, Femi had not wanted this to become real. He had wanted the excitement, the secrecy, the thrill of something forbidden. He had not wanted a baby. He had not wanted consequences. He had wanted to keep the affair clean and contained and somehow not truly damaging to the life he already had. That was the moment I understood that my mother had also been deceived. Not in the way I had been. She had chosen this. She had participated fully in the destruction of my marriage. But she had been deceived about what she was to him. She had believed herself to be the love of his life. He had believed her to be a secret pleasure. They were not the same. I told Femi I wanted a divorce. He didn't fight it. I asked him to leave the house. He packed a bag that same night. I watched him put things into a suitcase, and I noticed that he moved efficiently and without much visible emotion, the way people do when they've been mentally preparing for an exit for longer than you knew. That hurt too. That particular hurt, the understanding that someone was more ready to leave you than you had known, that the ending had been rehearsed. He left, the front door closed, and I was alone in my 4-bedroom house in Decatur, Georgia, in the middle of the afternoon, and the silence was so loud it rang. I sat down on the kitchen floor. I finally let myself sit down, and I cried. I cried for a long time. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the man I thought Femi was. I cried for the mother I had believed in my whole life, the mother who had pressed my hair and walked me down the aisle and wept with what I thought was pride. I cried for the little girl I'd been who had loved her mama so completely and so trustingly, and I cried for that girl's innocence, which was now gone for good. And when I was done crying, when the well had run dry, when I had nothing left, I sat on the floor in the quiet, and I breathed. And I thought about paint. I thought about the colors I had been working with in those stolen days alone, the burgundy bleeding into black, the yellow cutting through gray. I thought about the canvas sitting in my studio upstairs, half finished. I thought about how, when I didn't know what else to do, I painted. I had always been able to paint my way back to myself. I got up. I went upstairs, I picked up my brushes, and I began. You know what nobody tells you about surviving a betrayal this big? They tell you about the grief. They tell you about the anger. They tell you about the healing. But nobody tells you about the strange, quiet chapter that comes after the confrontation, when the people who hurt you are still out there living their lives, and you have to figure out what to do with the knowledge of what they're doing. Nobody tells you about the weeks you have to keep living in the same world as them before the divorce is finalized, before the dust has fully settled, while everything is still technically broken and not yet rebuilt. I filed for divorce. My lawyer was efficient and steady and did not make me tell the story more times than necessary, which I appreciated more than I can say. Femi did not contest it. In fact, the most striking thing about the entire divorce process was how easy he made it, how quickly he agreed to terms, how few arguments he raised, how cooperative he was in a practical sense, even as he had been completely destructive in a personal one. I have thought about that a lot. I think the ease of the divorce was its own kind of confession. He knew what he had done was indefensible. He wasn't going to stand in a courtroom and make me prove it. What I didn't anticipate were the updates I kept getting, second and third hand, about what was happening with Femi and Mama after I removed myself from both of their lives. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Mama had moved into Femi's apartment, the one he'd rented after leaving our house. I heard that she was several months pregnant and had been going to appointments alone, because Femi had begun to create distance between them even before the baby was showing. I heard that the warmth and attentiveness he had apparently been showering her with during the affair had cooled significantly once the reality of the situation set in. Once the affair became a life. Once the secret became a consequence. The truth about Femi, the thing I hadn't fully seen when I was inside the marriage, was that he was someone who was energized by what was hidden. The appeal of my mother had never been truly about my mother. It had been about the forbidden. The excitement of a secret. The particular thrill of having something that he absolutely should not have had. But affairs, when they become real life, stop being thrilling. They become ordinary, they become complicated and expensive and demanding. And Femi was not built for complicated and demanding. He was built for smooth surfaces. I found out later, much later, from Cynthia, who had a way of finding out things through a network of people I could never fully map, that Femi had actually met someone else. A woman named Amazing, an architect, someone he'd known years before. He'd been pursuing her while Mama was pregnant. He had introduced Mama to Amazing as his uncle's wife, which I'm sorry. And I know this is not the time to laugh, but that particular detail did reach me, and I will admit that I allowed myself one small, bitter, incredulous laugh. Because the audacity of the man was, if nothing else, consistent. And then came the moment that I heard about, and that has stayed with me as a kind of, I don't want to say justice, because justice is a complicated word, but as a kind of reckoning. Amazing had come to Femi's apartment and met Mama there, not knowing who she was. And Mama, who by this point had been demoted from secret lover to inconvenient resident, who had been sleeping in the guest room of the apartment she'd moved into, to be with the man she believed loved her, who had watched him pursue another woman while she was carrying his child. Mama had decided that if she was going down, she was not going down quietly. She had told Amazing everything. Standing in that apartment, she had shouted across the room that she was pregnant for Femi. She had told the truth, the whole truth, loudly and without apology. And Amazing, sensible, self-respecting woman that she apparently was had looked at both of them with the kind of clear-eyed contempt that only people who have not yet been broken by love can fully access, and she had walked right back out of that door. I heard this story and I sat with it for a long time. I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing. I felt quite a lot. I felt something from my mother that was complicated because watching someone experience the consequences of their own actions is not the same as watching them suffer, and I did not want to watch her suffer even then. I felt something for Femi that was cleaner, simpler, closer to the satisfaction you feel when a story resolves the way it should. And I felt something for Amazing, whom I had never met, that was almost affectionate, a stranger solidarity. The way women sometimes feel for each other when they narrowly escape the same disaster. But mostly what I felt sitting with that story was a kind of release. Not closure, exactly. Closure is one of those words that I've come to think is slightly misleading, because some wounds don't close, they scar, and scars are with you forever. They just don't hurt the same way. But a release, like a pressure valve finally being turned. Like the last locked room in a house finally being opened. The thing I've had to sit with, the thing I've had to make peace with, is this. My mother did not destroy my marriage. My husband destroyed my marriage. My mother participated, and her participation was a unique and particular cruelty that I am not going to minimize. But marriages are destroyed from within, by the people who made vows and then chose not to keep them. Femi made a choice every single day for however long that affair was happening. He chose it when he could have ended it. He chose it when I was in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, doing everything I knew how to do to be a good wife. That understanding that the failure of my marriage was about his choices, not my insufficiency, took a long time to reach. Months of therapy, months of painting, months of long conversations with Cynthia and with Benson, who became a more consistent presence in my life during that period, a steady, uncomplicated friendship that reminded me that not all people who care about you have an agenda. But I did reach it, and when I did, something shifted. Because here's what I know now, standing on the other side of it. You cannot be destroyed by someone else's choices if you refuse to let their choices define you. My mother chose to betray me. My husband chose to betray me. Those were their choices, and they have to carry them. But I get to choose what comes next. I get to choose who I become in the aftermath. I get to decide what this story means. And I decided a long time ago what it means. It means that I am not someone who can be broken by betrayal. It means that what they took from me, they thought they were taking everything, but they were wrong. They took my marriage. They didn't take me. I was still there. I was always still there. It has been 2 years now. 2 years and some months to be exact. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday in March, and I remember that when my lawyer called to tell me, I was in the middle of a painting, a big one, 4 feet by 5, all amber and gold. The warmest thing I had made in a long time. I remember setting the phone down after the call and just standing there in front of the canvas with my brushes in my hand, and thinking this is the first day of the rest of my life. I know that sounds like something you'd find on a motivational poster, but I mean it in the most literal, unadorned way. That day was a threshold. I stepped through it. I want to tell you about what happened on the other side, because I think this is the part of the story that matters most. Not the betrayal. That's what gets the attention, I understand. It's what draws people in, because it's dramatic and painful and relatable in the way that great suffering is always relatable. But the rebuilding, the daily, quiet, unglamorous work of putting yourself back together, that's where the actual story lives. That's where I found out who I was. The first thing I did after the divorce was quit my job at the gallery. I know. But listen, I had been working there for 6 years and I loved the work. I truly did. But I had also been using that job to subsidize my painting rather than really committing to my painting, and that had been a choice rooted in fear. The fear that my art wasn't good enough to stand on its own. The fear that wanting to be seen, truly seen as an artist, was too ambitious, too vulnerable, too much. I had been playing small with the thing I loved most, and I think some part of me had known that for years and been looking for an excuse to stop. The betrayal became the excuse. Or maybe the permission. When you lose everything you thought your life was built on, you discover that you have nothing left to be careful about. You've already survived the worst thing. Caution stops making sense. I started painting full-time. I converted the spare bedroom, the room that had originally been our guest room, that my mother had slept in during those months she lived with us, into a proper studio. I painted it white. I put in better lighting. I moved all of my canvases and supplies in. And then I painted like I had never painted before in my life. There is something that happens to your art when you've been through something that nearly destroyed you. I don't know how to explain it to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's like the suffering burns away everything that was performative, everything that was self-conscious, everything that was made for other people's approval. And what's left is the truest possible version of what you were always trying to say. My paintings from that period were the best work I had ever done. I knew it while I was making them. There was a rawness to them, a depth that I had been reaching for years and had never quite grasped. Benson was there during those months in a way that I'm deeply grateful for. He would come by on Saturday afternoons and we'd walk in the park or get coffee, and he would ask to see what I'd been working on. And he would look at my paintings with the same stillness and attention that I had first admired in Femi, at that gallery opening years ago. But unlike Femi, whose attentiveness had been, I now understood, partly performance, Benson's was just genuine. He was genuinely curious. He genuinely cared. I want to be clear again. It stayed a friendship for a long time. He was respectful of where I was. He never pushed for anything more. He was just there, steady, warm, interested in me as a person, not as a romantic prospect or a project. I had needed that so badly. I hadn't known how badly until I had it. Cynthia, meanwhile, was her usual magnificent self. She came over every few weeks and made me eat properly and watch comedies and talk through how I was feeling, and she asked hard questions with a gentleness that is a particular and rare gift. She also periodically updated me on the situation with Femi and Mama, not out of cruelty or gossip, but because she knew that not knowing was sometimes worse than knowing. The updates were grim for a while, and then they leveled out, and eventually I asked her to stop sharing them with me because I had gotten to a place where I genuinely didn't need to know anymore. That was a milestone, the day I genuinely stopped needing to know. The day their story stopped feeling like something that was happening to me and started feeling like something that was happening to them, separately, in a different life. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I had enough new work for a solo exhibition. My friend Marcus, who ran a gallery in the old 4th Ward, offered me the space. I called the show Surviving the Fire. Not subtle, I know, but I had earned the right to be direct. The opening night was the most important night of my professional life. The room was fuller than I'd expected, honestly. People came not just from Atlanta but from as far as DC and New York. The work spoke for itself. I watched strangers stand in front of my paintings with their arms folded and their faces open, and I saw them feeling something. And it was the most powerful experience I had ever had as an artist. Because what they were feeling was true. Every piece in that show had been made from something true. Several pieces sold that night, including 2 large ones. Marcus told me he had never seen a solo debut generate that kind of response. I stood in the middle of the room with a glass of sparkling water in my hand. I'd stopped drinking during my healing period and honestly didn't miss it, and I thought about the woman I had been 2 years before, lying awake in the dark staring at the ceiling, listening to her husband talk on the phone to her mother at 3 in the morning. I thought about how small and invisible I had felt in that house, in that marriage. I thought about how I had not recognized myself in the mirror for months. I recognized myself now. And then something happened at the opening that I was not prepared for. I was talking to Benson. He had come to the show, of course, he had, and Marcus was nearby with a group of collectors, and the room was buzzing with conversation and warmth and the particular energy of a successful opening. I had stepped away for a moment just to breathe, to collect myself, and I turned around and there she was. My mother. Standing at the entrance of the gallery in a dress I didn't recognize, looking older than I remembered her, thinner. She had a small baby carrier strapped to the front of her. The baby, I realized with a jolt, must be about 3 months old. She was alone. She saw me see her. We looked at each other across the length of the gallery, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath, even though no one else knew who she was. She walked toward me slowly, the way people walk when they know they don't have the right to be somewhere, but they've come anyway because they had no other choice. She stopped about 2 feet away from me. "My daughter," she said. Her voice was so quiet, so different from the voice I remembered, the loud, confident, room-filling voice that had always made me feel both sheltered and overshadowed. This voice was a smaller thing, an apologetic thing. "I've been looking for you for so long. I tried calling. I know you changed your number. I know I have no right to be here, but She stopped, pressed her lips together, tried again. "I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, that I know what I did was unforgivable, that I have thought about it every single day, and I am—" "Mama," I said. She stopped. "I forgave you," I said. "A long time ago. I had to for my own sake. Carrying that much anger was making me sick, and I chose not to be sick anymore." She started to cry. Those brown eyes I had loved my whole life, filling up. "But," I said, and I said it gently, because I had no desire to be cruel. I had moved beyond cruelty. "That doesn't mean I want you in my life. Forgiveness and reconciliation are 2 different things. I forgave you so that I could be free. Not so that we could go back to what we were. We can never go back to that. I'm not going back to that." "Sarah." "I wish you well," I said. "I truly do. I wish you health and peace, and I hope the baby is healthy and loved, but you and we're done. And I think, if you sit with it honestly, you understand why." She stood there for another moment. The tears were falling freely now. She reached out once, like she might touch my arm, and then let her hand drop. "I know," she said. "I know. I'm lonely. I'm so lonely, and I'm so sorry, and I don't know how to—" "Mama." I said it one more time, and this time I said it the way you say a name when you're setting it down, when you're putting it somewhere safe and stepping back from it. "I have to get back to my guests." I watched her turn and walk back toward the door. I watched her push through it and disappear into the night. And I stood there for a moment with my hand pressed flat against my sternum, feeling my own heartbeat, feeling it steady and rhythmic and alive. Benson appeared at my shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "I am. I'm going to bring this home now, because I've been talking for a long time, and I want to make sure that what I leave you with is the thing that matters most. Not the betrayal, not the drama, not even the healing exactly. What I want to leave you with is what I've learned. Because I believe that stories, even painful ones, especially painful ones, only earn the telling if they leave something behind. Some truth that was worth the suffering to discover. So here is what I know now, on the other side of all of it. I know that you cannot love someone into loyalty. You can be the best partner in the world, present, loving, giving, creative, kind, and if someone has chosen to be disloyal, your goodness will not save you. This was the hardest lesson and the most important one, because I spent a lot of the early part of my healing asking myself what I had done wrong, what I could have done differently, whether I had been too absent, too distracted, too focused on my career, too something. And the answer, the true answer, the one I had to work very hard to accept, is that I had not done anything wrong. Femi's choices were Femi's choices. My mother's choices were her own. I was not responsible for their character. I know that betrayal from a parent is a specific and particular kind of wound that is different from other betrayals, because parents are the original architects of your understanding of love. When a parent betrays you, they don't just hurt you. They retrofit the past. They make you go back and look at every moment of childhood, love, and ask whether it was real, whether you were being loved or being managed, whether the person you built your sense of safety around was ever actually safe. That is a brutal thing to do to a child, regardless of how old that child is when it happens. And I know that the retrofit is a lie. I know it now. Whatever my mother's failures, and they were profound and real. She did also love me in her way, in the flawed and complicated and sometimes selfish way that humans love each other. The Sunday hair pressing was real. The double shifts at the hospital were real. The holding on when my daddy died was real. People can love you genuinely and still betray you. That is a terrible truth, but it's still true. And accepting it, sitting with the full complexity of it, neither writing her off as a monster nor excusing what she did is what allowed me to forgive her without letting her back in. I know that healing is not linear. I know that there were weeks during those 2 years where I felt fine, genuinely fine, and then something small would happen. A song or a smell or a particular quality of afternoon light, and the grief would come rushing back like water through a crack. And I know that this does not mean you are not healing. It means you're a human. Grief is not a problem to be solved. It's a process to be honored. I know that friendships are underrated. The quiet, consistent, non-romantic love that a true friend offers you, the kind Cynthia offered me, the kind Benson offered me, is one of the most powerful forces in the world. I would not have survived that period without them. I would not have found my way back to myself without them. We talk so much about romantic love, and romantic love is beautiful and important, but the love of a friend who sees you clearly and chooses you anyway is its own extraordinary thing. I know that my painting saved me. I know that whatever was taken from me, the marriage, the security, the particular version of my future that I thought I was building, whatever was taken could not touch the deepest thing, the essential thing, the thing that makes me, my art, my voice. The way I see color and use it to say the things that words can't reach. That was mine before Femi, before the marriage, before any of it. And it remains mine. That is the thing about knowing who you are at the core. It cannot be stolen. It can be buried, it can be suppressed, it can be forgotten for a while, but it cannot be stolen. And here is the last thing, the most personal thing. About 6 months after the gallery show, Benson asked me to dinner. Not a friendly dinner. He was clear about that. He said he had been patient because he wanted me to be ready, and he had been paying attention, and he thought I was getting there. And if he was wrong, he would never mention it again, and we could go on being friends, and he would be grateful for that. He said it quietly, and a little nervously, sitting across from me in the coffee shop where we'd had so many of our Saturday conversations, and I looked at him. Really. Looked at him. The way you look at someone when you allow yourself to stop being careful. And I felt something. Something warm and specific and, for the first time in a very long time, unafraid. I said yes. We have been together for about a year now. I am not going to tell you that it has been effortless, because I was coming out of something serious, and I had walls that I didn't always know were there until one of them rose up unexpectedly and surprised us both. But Benson is patient in a way that has nothing to do with passivity. It's the patience of someone who understands that things worth having are worth waiting for. He is kind in all the small daily ways that matter more than grand gestures. He is interested in my work and proud of it in a way that feels like genuine delight, not performance. He makes me laugh. He makes me feel safe. Is he perfect? No. Am I? Not remotely. But we are building something honest, and after everything that I have been through, honesty is the thing I value most. Honesty and steadiness and the kind of love that does not ask you to shrink yourself to be received. My paintings are in 3 galleries now. I have been commissioned to do a large installation for a community arts center opening next year. My work has been reviewed in 2 regional arts publications. I am, without any exaggeration or false modesty, in the best creative period of my life. I think about that sometimes. I think about how what was supposed to destroy me ended up being the thing that broke me all the way open, and how breaking all the way open was what allowed the truest version of me to finally emerge. I am not grateful for what happened. I want to be clear about that. I do not subscribe to the philosophy that we should be thankful for our pain. What happened to me was wrong. It was a betrayal of the deepest kind by 2 people who should have protected me. And it caused real damage that I had to work very hard to repair. But I'm grateful for who I am now. I am grateful for the depth I found in the fire. I am grateful for the paintings that came out of the grief. I am grateful for Cynthia and Benson. I am grateful for the version of myself who woke up on a kitchen floor in Decatur, Georgia, and decided to go upstairs and pick up her brushes. That woman had more in her than she knew. She always had. I wrote this letter during one of my therapy sessions about 8 months into my healing. My therapist suggested it not to send but just to write. She said sometimes we carry things that need to be put down, and the act of addressing them directly, even if the address never gets delivered, can help us put them down. I'm going to read it to you now. Not because I want to shame anyone, not because I'm still angry, but because I think there might be someone watching this right now who is living inside their own version of this story. Someone who is lying awake in the dark right now, feeling the particular loneliness of suspecting something but not yet knowing, carrying the weight of a truth that hasn't arrived yet. And I want that person to know you are going to be okay. I promise you, you are going to be okay. This is what I wrote. Dear Femi and Mama, I have spent a long time trying to understand what happened between us. Not to excuse it, not even to fully explain it. Just to understand, because I am someone who needs to understand things before I can set them down. What I've come to understand is this. You were both incomplete, not broken. I don't believe in writing people off as broken but incomplete in ways that my love was never going to be able to fix. Femi, you were someone who needed the rush of what was hidden, the thrill of the forbidden. You mistook that rush for love. You built something on top of it that you called connection and meaning and fate, but it was built on adrenaline, not on anything real. And when the adrenaline faded, there was nothing underneath. Mama, you were someone who had been lonely for so long since Daddy died, since your life stopped going the direction you'd planned, that you mistook attention for love. Someone finally made you feel chosen and beautiful and special, and you wanted that so badly that you were willing to do the unthinkable to hold on to it. I understand that hunger. I don't excuse what you did with it, but I understand it. I want you both to know that I don't hate you. Hate would require me to keep caring, and I have chosen to spend my caring on things that return it. But I do want you to know that what you did had consequences. Not just from me, for yourselves. You tried to build something on top of someone else's pain, and things built on pain don't hold. You are both, I suspect, less happy now than you expected to be. That is not my doing. That is the natural consequence of choices made without integrity. I forgive you. I say this not for your benefit but for mine. Forgiveness is how I get to be free. I hope you find peace. I hope you find whatever it is you were actually looking for when you found each other. I hope the baby is healthy and loved. I hope you both someday become the versions of yourselves that are capable of real love, the kind that doesn't require someone else to bleed. I'm not waiting for that day. I have my own life to live. Sarah. That's the letter. That's the story. If you are sitting somewhere right now and you recognize any part of what I've described, the feeling of being the last to know in your own home, the quiet alarm that won't stop going off, the grief of loving someone who is hurting you, I want you to hear me when I say this. Trust yourself. Your body is telling you the truth. The alarm is real. You are not paranoid. You are paying attention. And whatever you find when you finally look, whatever truth arrives when you're ready to receive it, you will survive it. I know because I survived mine, and I was not special or unusually strong. I was just a woman with a set of paintbrushes and the stubborn conviction that I was worth more than I was being given. So are you. You are worth more than you're being given. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for listening. This story was not easy to tell, and your presence made it easier. If this reached you, if some part of this is yours, if you needed to hear it today, please know that I see you. Wherever you are, I see you. Take care of yourself. Build something true. I'll see you next time.